a new holiday was born. A Festivus for the rest of us. And at the Festivus dinner, you gather your family around and tell them all the ways they have disappointed you over the past year.
And is there a tree?
No, instead there's a pole. Requires no decoration. I find tinsel distracting.
It's a Festivus miracle.
Welcome, newcomers. The tradition of Festivus begins with the airing of grievances. I got a lot of problems with you people. Now, you're gonna hear about it.
It needs all the things. Give it all the things.
Oh, perfect. You nailed it.
You can't bend physics. What you can do is write better software.
And you're doing MPLS changes or BGP changes. May God be with you, right?
I always feel like I'm just a little fish in a sea of big fish.
I've got a nested 6-node vSAN.
Oh, guys.
People, quite often think that they don't have anything to bring to the table when they absolutely do.
Everybody should. Anybody in IT that skips the phone stuff, it just hasn't earned it.
Okay, I lied. I have one more question.
On demand.
Correct.
Welcome to GigaCast episode 24 for Sunday, December 9th, 2018. I'm Britton Johnson, live to tape from the GigaCast headquarters.
And broadcasting live from my home lab, I'm Tony Reeves.
Happy December, Tony. How are you?
Doing good. Staying busy. I'm back to work now. So.
Oh, you poor guy. 6 weeks of new parent leave is done just like that.
It went by quick, man. I tell you that.
So what all did you accomplish with all of this massive amounts of time you had at your hands?
Well, I did a bunch of stuff. I did a bunch of cleanup, a lot of organizing, got a lot of projects done. Of course, helped out with the kids and got to take my son to school almost every day. So that was cool. And
nice.
I built the Lego GT3 RS. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I saw that. Was that like one of those Technic builds, or I'm not a Lego guy, so I really don't know what they are.
It's pretty cool. It has, shifting transmission, pistons that move through the engine, working steering. It's pretty detailed.
Nice. All right. Well, that's fun. So it's because we do these once a month. My brilliant idea, maybe after today we'll find out if it's brilliant or not, was to invite some of our actual listeners to talk to us today and see what they have to share with us about what we do here and what they do, and let's learn about them, and they can help us and we can help them, and it'll just be a good family episode. So
yeah, it should be a good time.
So we have, if you're watching video later, we have on our roster of esteemed panelists, top to bottom is, of course, Tony. How are you? We were ready to talk to you, so we know who you are. There's me. And then our another fellow Wisconsinite, Mr. Donnie Lang. How are you?
Hey, good. How are you guys? Thanks for having me.
No problem. Where in Wisconsin are you?
I live in Appleton, work in De Pere, which is about 20 minutes north of Appleton.
Oh, De Pere, yes. I have fond memories of De Pere. We'll talk about that later, though. So what exactly do you do? Who do you work for? Are you allowed to say? Are you working for a quasi-government shadow agency so you can't say anything? Or
Nothing quite that secretive. So I'm Donnie Lang. I work as a senior infrastructure engineer for Ensight. So they are a regional telecommunications provider in Northeast Wisconsin. Okay. And Upper Michigan.
Cool.
Do a little bit of everything. Compute, storage, virtualization, networking, security, wear a lot of hats.
Awesome. You are our target audience. Thank you for listening.
And a fellow Wisconsin VMUG board member with me.
Yeah. Yes, you have close ties to the family here, so thank you. Mr. Tony G. Gonzo, how are you, sir?
I am well. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
So,
I'm happy to be here.
You are in the wonderful state of Colorado.
I am.
Are you in Denver proper, or where are you?
No, I live in Aurora, about 20 minutes southeast of Denver.
Okay.
It's basically the biggest metropolitan city in Denver.
Is it as cool as the Aurora, Illinois from Wayne's World?
Yeah, you know what? I've never seen the Aurora, Illinois from Wayne's World. Only in Wayne's World. So no, I want to say no.
I've actually been to Aurora, Illinois, and that car thing where all these cars are stacked up on a post is actually real.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Nice.
Fun. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Gonzo. Because we already have a Tony, we're going to probably refer to this Tony as Gonzo. So, and you can give us at some point your feedback on what it was like to room with Tony at VMworld. So,
Sure.
In the center of the box, the main man of the hour, Mr. Nate. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah. So, Nate, who are you? What do you do?
My name's Nate Hudson. I am a senior solutions engineer at VMware.
Nice.
Live in Brown Deer, a suburb of the lovely Milwaukee metro area.
I bought a car in Brown Deer once. That's about the only thing I have tying me to Brown Deer, but that's about it. Thank you for joining us, Nate. Matt, how do you say your last name?
Langeth.
Langeth. That sounds like a serious last name. Is it Scottish or Irish or what is it?
It is Northern German.
Oh, neither. Man, I was way off. And you hail from
Central Pennsylvania. I'm about an hour south of Penn State University.
Okay.
So State College.
Now, if I recall correctly, you work for a company that does truck accessories.
Yes, I'm a small regional manufacturer that makes truck accessories. So I'm an information systems manager for that manufacturer.
Wow. I don't know. It's all the different industries that everybody comes from. It just fascinates me that this is what we all do for a living, and this is the broad spectrum of stuff that we support. So it's just fun.
I see you got Wally in the background there.
Yes, I see that too. That's a very interesting. Did you build that Wally, or where did that come from?
That Wally came from Japan, and he's a good office mascot.
Is he like robotic or controlled or remote control or anything like that, or just
RC?
RC, nice.
Wow, so he actually does things?
He does.
Cool.
Demo.
If we run out of things to talk about, maybe you can give us a demo. Yeah.
Wally.
And of course, the guy chiming in on that was Mr. Al Rashid, the famous Al Rashid. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for bailing on me this morning and then joining at the last minute. I appreciate it.
No worries, dude.
Actually, we should say thank you to your wife so that you could be here.
Yes, she's a trooper. I will have her listen to this when it's available on the podcast.
So Al, I know
Rashid.
I know roughly who you are, but I don't actually know what you do. So can you give me any 411? But I know you work in Virginia, so you might actually work for a quasi-shadow government agency that you can't tell me anything about.
I do. So I'm a systems administrator for a federal contractor here in the DC area. I'm actually in Northern Virginia, which is about 25 miles from DC.
So you might actually be under an NDA. All right. All right. Well, we won't talk about UFOs or anything like that. So. And last but not least, Mr. Joe Hughes. How are you, sir?
Howdy. Doing good.
So, Joe, you changed jobs recently. Where are you working now?
Yeah, I actually just finished week 4 at Veeam, so I'm now a solutions architect for Veeam software.
Cool.
Wow, week 4 already.
Yeah. Flew by.
All right.
I didn't even know you started. That's what happens when I'm in the parental leave bubble.
Yeah, I had internal people that didn't realize I was there for about 2 weeks and then started sending all kinds of help requests.
Nice.
Yep.
All right, cool. Well, maybe we can talk more about that later too. Okay, so it's going to be pretty loose, I think. Tony, do you have anything you want to start off with immediately, or do you want to just pick something random out of the hat?
Who was recently to reInvent? Looks like that's on the topic list here.
Did anybody go to reInvent?
Is anybody there in our panel?
No.
Nope.
Bummer.
Negative.
Well, Nate, you were the guy who was excited about it, so give us your 1 or 2 things that you thought was exciting.
So I know I've been a little bit, even as a VMware employee, I've been a little bit skeptic on the whole any cloud, any app, any device kind of technical marketing stuff that we have at VMware. I think one of the things that was noticeable at VMworld this year, the announcement of bringing in a RDS database, native from AWS back on prem. I think now in my mind, after learning more about the announcements made around AWS outposts, one running a Cloud Foundation footprint, another one running a kind of a EC2 on Cloud Foundation footprint for customers that are truly trying to find ways of building that hybrid cloud environment. You pick your poison now. Do you want a VMware friendly hypervisor, or do you want a native EC2 hypervisor that just shows up as a another availability zone that resides in your data center? I know a lot of my customers have been asking about things like, hey, I want vCenter as a service, or I want hardware as a service. Make it easier for me to be able to just not have to deal with racking and stacking and managing the life cycle of my hybrid cloud. So here's your kind of easy button. Imagine like something crazy like going into AWS console and saying, I'd like to order up a rack of hardware. And somebody shows up with a rack of, super micron white box hardware in your data center. And all you do is plug it into the network and plug it into power. And suddenly it checks back in and you've got a new availability zone that shows up in AWS in your portal.
I didn't do a lot of reading on this Outpost thing where they put supposedly Amazon hardware in your data center. But everything I know about Amazon hardware is it's not Supermicro stuff. It's all spec'd to their own manufacturer specifications, and so they ship it from somebody in China probably who makes it for them.
Yeah,
and it's all custom. So I don't know. I'm skeptical on how it's going to work, and I'm skeptical that it's going to be cheap. I don't think it's going to be cheap. I think it's going to be more expensive than if you if you went like with VxRail or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about like some of the stuff that was announced at VMworld, they talked a little bit about like product or project dimension as an example, and that's really hey, I just need somebody to drop ship some hardware out to an edge site someplace. I have no IT staff there to be able to manage it. I just need somebody there to plug it in, and then it checks in, and VMware manages it for me from a vCenter and from a lifecycle standpoint. I think customers that have been, I understand the strategy. I understand what AWS is doing here, because they want to do kind of what VMware has been talking about doing for quite a while here, and providing like an actual hybrid cloud platform that you can use. They really didn't have a hybrid cloud platform, but they understood, besides customers really, loving what AWS can provide on native EC2 instance, there are use cases where workloads need to reside close to where the data is.
Right.
You still have customers that have mainframes, running in their data center. They have some legacy hardware. And I think Pat Gelsinger's even said that, another, 7 to 10 years down the road, there still will be probably a small footprint of physical hardware running in a data center someplace that won't ever get.
I don't think we'll ever get away from on-prem hardware completely. Matt, if I recall correctly, Matt, you almost had a slightly conspiratorial view of what AWS Outpost is going to be.
Well, I won't go as far as conspiratorial, but I will say it makes sense if you would look at it from a OpEx expenditure of, let's say that they come, and I haven't seen pricing announced, so let's say it's $1,000 a month or $10,000 a month. But if you take the analogy that Outpost will be a on-prem backup for AWS, where those wouldn't be necessarily running production instances, what are you going to do with the excess mem and compute?
I see.
So if you can sell those services or that capacity, if you will, back to Amazon, and then Amazon now has multiple points of DR and expanding out their data center footprint.
See, and I read what you said about that as though, is AWS Outpost going to be a long-term DR and expansion strategy for Amazon, as though Amazon is going to use that hardware to run other customers' workloads in your data center.
Oh, like without telling you?
Yeah. Which is why I say quasi-conspiratorial, because it's like, oh yeah, here, we'll put this stuff, you guys just do all those, you build the buildings for us, we'll just run our stuff wherever we want. Like, you don't have control over it.
With microsegmentation, it could also be, well, what level of discount will you accept?
Exactly. And if you're willing to allow that, you know, I don't know of a lot of companies that might be open to that, but you know, if you get a rack of hardware that you can only use 50% of the capacity and you can lease out the other 50% back to Amazon.
I think from an OpEx standpoint, that would make sense, but I don't think from a security standpoint, not a lot of VPs and directors are going to understand the microseg part, and I think they're going to have security questions on that side.
Well,
I would agree with that too, but if it gets to the point of the discount makes enough sense, if it's 60, 70, 80% off of what the normal monthly cost is going to be, they'll get past the security concerns as long as it can be proven.
Well, but I could see Amazon requiring a certain prerequisite of building structure to do that kind of stuff too. I mean, you're not going to just have somebody put this in their garage and, you know, away you go. So,
well, because at that point, even connectivity to your data center is something that Amazon is slightly reliable for to that other customer.
Correct.
And there's other questions along like bandwidth. I mean, you're paying for the bandwidth and other people are using it. That could be a little questionable there too.
It is interesting though. Like one of my customers owns a building downtown Madison that is classified as a carrier hotel. There are probably about 100 different ISPs in this building, and they could easily house one of these units and give it multiple, you know, connection points, and away they go. So, I mean, if Amazon was looking to spread its footprint into different facilities like that, I mean, that's even another way they could do it. It's just lease a rack somewhere and put some stuff in small towns.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see where they go with it.
Yeah. All right, listener feedback time. Tony, go with your question.
So my question is for Al. Al, you've been one of our longest listeners and one of the first people to reach out to us when we started this podcast. So a couple questions for you, actually. We're going to split this out. I'll give you one and I'll give one to somebody else. What can we do to make the show better?
To be honest with you, I enjoy the show. I enjoy the various topics that you have, the hosts and then the guests that you include. I think I'm not just, saying this for the sake of saying, I think you guys do a good job at what you're doing. Anything always, there's always ways to improve it. Mm-hmm. But overall, I think the content and the quality is fine by me.
Yeah, we didn't invite you guys on just so you could make us feel really good about ourselves, but yeah, I do appreciate that.
The feedback too, so
yeah.
No, like I said, I'll be honest with you, but to this point, I overall I love it. You guys know when I can't listen live or watch live, I'll catch it on the podcast later. So yeah, I think you guys are doing a great job, and it takes a lot of credit to do what you do as well.
Well, we appreciate that, Al. Let's see. Let's go to Matt. How have we helped?
This is one of my top listens. It's always consistently of the virtualization space that's out there. It seems like the hot topic, and at least within the last 18 months, is let's do a podcast. Mm-hmm. So the space is cluttered right now, but you guys really stand out at the top, especially the amount of work and time and effort you put into it. I would ask what do you guys have planned for 2019? What do you see yourselves doing? What's your top 3 things that you want to take it to the next level?
Well, first of all, Matt, if you think we put in a ton of time, oh my gosh. Then I don't know what I'm doing, but
we put the time in to do scheduling. There's not a ton there.
Yeah,
we're fortunate to be both really plugged into the vExpert community. Yeah. We have a lot of options.
Probably the most amount of time that I do on this thing is post-editing the shows a little bit and uploading it and publishing it. I mean, that takes probably more time than actually doing the recording. But
actually, I do have one comment or question.
Yeah,
sure.
Because I know, Britton, you were the NSX roving reporter at VMworld, and you did a good job.
Thank you.
Have you guys considered doing a podcast on premise, on location?
The only thing we did that was close to that is I was in flight on my way back from VMworld, and we did a live from the airport.
Yeah. And I did a one-off interview with VMware employee Patrick Kramer at the Chicago UserCon. That kind of stuff is hard to do in this format, so that's why I have the YouTube channel. So I can post the video from these sessions, but if I do little one-offs, I pretty much just put them on the YouTube channel, and I don't really feed the audio back into the audio stream. That is maybe something we could do in the future, but I don't know.
Well, we did our VMworld daily recaps.
Yeah.
And
that's all stuff on the YouTube channel. So follow the YouTube channel if you haven't already, because there's other stuff out there besides what we just do on the audio only channels. But Matt, to your question again, like what are we going to do for 2019? Between Tony and I, the contacts we made at VMworld last and everywhere else, I think if we stick to this once a month schedule, I pretty much easily have the whole year booked.
We're booked out.
I just confirmed before the show tonight, for the first time, my brother Heath is going to join us and talk about Cloud Foundation in January. His associate, Kevin
T-Bear.
Thank you. I think Kevin's going to kill me for that. He lives right around the corner from me. So Kevin T-Bear and him, either him and Kevin or just Heath, one of the two, will join us and we'll talk all about Cloud Foundation, because especially after all the stuff that came out at AWS reInvent, it seems like Cloud Foundation was just like the thing that all of a sudden happened. So that's January. It's one of these things where if I had more time, I would do more of these episodes, but it's so hard to get 2 hours like this and get people on a schedule and have it happen, and not have your wife mad at you because you're away on a Sunday night or a Saturday or a Friday or whenever you're doing it. So I would love to do more, but it's just not in the cards yet. So in terms of where we're going, Tony and I kind of stumbled into this format of talking to a guest and getting in deep on one specific topic that the guest is good at. If anybody listened back to the first couple episodes, I'm sorry. Those first couple episodes of just Tony and I going back and forth about stuff. It was okay, but we both realized we hit the ceiling of what we can talk to each other about pretty quickly. Yeah. So it helps to have a third party, and that's part of this whole, at that point I was just kind of getting connected into this V community thing myself, and so I didn't have all the contacts that Tony had, and so I didn't know how to pull you people in so we can talk to you, and I didn't really know that anybody would actually be that interested to talk to us, because who are we? We're just a couple of schmoes from Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. So the fact that you have found, knowledge or anything entertaining or whatever from us, I'm grateful for that. So.
Yeah. And one thing that we try to do, as Britton already mentioned, we tried to grow the format and get guests and experts in specific topics. But the other thing we got some advice on from Britton, I think that was Cody, that advised us to start doing video. We could connect with more people that way and show them what we look like and get a little more interactive. One thing that I would like to see us do at some point, and I don't know if there's a way to tie it into Zoom or some other way to do it, is some sort of a live broadcast where people could watch live.
Right.
I don't know that's something we can do immediately, but that's something that's kind of on the radar as well.
I looked at it briefly. There is a way to do it, but it costs $45 a month. So I have never asked anybody for money to do the show. I don't really want to necessarily do that. But I kind of felt like until we had a big enough audience to make it worthwhile, I didn't want to invest it. But by all means, if somebody wants to sponsor the show and sponsor our live broadcast, send me an email.
Or if there's some way to do it reliably free, we'd be open to that too.
That I have not seen. But yeah. All right. Let's jump back to more technical stuff. We'll kind of bounce it through this a little bit. All right. So, Gonzo, you had talked about being interested in this VMware on ARM thing.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this exciting
Right.
to you? Because you can really not as far as I can see, you can't do much with this stuff yet. So where do you see this going?
Well, what I thought was pretty interesting, it's just what the technology can do, not something that I didn't see any dates in the VMworld announcement that I thought were like, oh, you know what, VMware's doing something. But in that regard, what I'm excited about VMware, or why I'm excited about VMware on ARM, is just all the edge devices that they're talking about. Because right now ARM is pretty much on like mobile devices, edge devices such as servers, routers. Especially in that realm, I thought it was interesting because, especially like when if your system admins, like let's say like they're out there patching, making, updating software on these edge devices, and just like what we do with servers, we compute, we can virtualize it, we can just basically test that patch out or that firmware upgrade, and if it foobars anything, we can roll that back. With these edge devices, I mean, there's really no way of doing that. You kind of pray and hope you have your ER strategy is pretty solid, because if that's out, I mean, if that node doesn't come back up, then all your other nodes are offline. And that's what I thought it was pretty interesting. Hopefully they get a timeline here soon, but I figured that would be interesting.
Anybody else want to chime in on this?
I'll take a stab at it. I think it would be interesting long term if you look at 3 to 5 years of, imagine if there was a model where you would have the equivalent of a Cisco ISR, where it's just a gray box where you have mem, compute, and storage, but then take what is now the Cloud Foundation suite and call it Cloud Foundation Edge. So if you wanted to deploy out, depending on where your licensing's at, you have NSX, vSAN, whatever else that you would want to deploy within the suite, all within one box. And then what feature set that you would be able to deploy would be based on the licensing. And within vSAN that you could use from another branch office, one of these other devices to act as your either a peer mirror or to provide quorum between the other devices. And do it at low power consumption.
Run a witness appliance, right? On a Raspberry or something. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, that's what came immediately to mind for me too, like especially for, large scale, where people have a large number of distributed sites, being able to drive those power consumption costs down could be a huge benefit over x86.
I don't know. I mean, I still come back to there's not a lot of RAM typically in these things. And, as much as people want to get away from running Windows VMs, there's still going to be some requirements for that. So I don't know. That's just been what I've seen, even on some of the enterprise projects I'm involved in, where, these guys are tied to legacy applications that run in Windows. And, somebody built it 20 years ago, and now there's basically key keepers today who run these applications, and they don't even know how they're built. Well, they're just tasked with keeping them running. So
this is just going to be edge services at that point. It's not going to be, your high-end DBs. Basic print services, maybe some local file storage. It would be stuff that would work well within serverless applications that wouldn't take a lot of compute and mem.
Or just
it's developed out very well.
Yeah, data collection and processing from localized sensors in places where you don't necessarily have to have super reliable power and cooling and stuff.
I guess
absolutely, Joe.
I guess the one thing I could see from like a DR perspective is utilizing this as like a staging infrastructure for DR. So if you didn't need a whole lot of resources just to, replicate data from one site to the other, you could have your ESXi hosts on ARM hooked up somehow or another to some sort of a storage device, or use Veeam or Zerto or whatever, so that you can at least have your data in another place, and then at such point that you want to spin up actual machine, big beefy servers to run at stuff in a DR scenario, then you could do that. Because I've been on projects now where that's part of the deal is they spin up all this iron, but it's never actually getting used for anything except for syncing data, which is kind of a big waste.
And I think the platform is going to grow too. I saw some people complaining about, what's the point of this? There's no RAM on a Pi. There's hardly anything in there. And Duncan Epping made some interesting observations and replies to that on Twitter. And he said that it's more about the engineering effort to get ESXi to run on 512 megabytes of RAM. So it's an efficiency thing. It's a proof of concept at this point. And then the other point that he made is that there's going to be devices in the future that are going to be running ARM. They're going to have more memory available than just a Pi. That's just kind of an example scenario right now of running a witness host on a Raspberry Pi. But I think the more it gets developed, the more hardware comes out. I think there's going to be some viable options for it. I think it's going to be pretty exciting.
Well, and even just having the availability to have like nano and micro data centers that live, spread out throughout a city, where like the city can run this anywhere they've got power and network. So, you've got compute even at a small scale that's within like a millisecond of latency anywhere in the city for anything they've got connected.
Yeah, I thought like cell sites for 5G initiatives would be an interesting use case too. Like,
in
terms of edge computing, a lot more data and getting it close to that cell site is important.
Yeah. Well, and I know, having spoken to a couple of people about some really off the wall projects that they were thinking of having this as a platform that would use it. It's even doing stuff like where they go fly drones around to do offsite surveys for oil rigs and stuff that are out on the seas. They can now fly around a cluster of compute that's there. They can start crunching data like while the thing is still in flight, and then doesn't have to transmit a lot of data back over the little miniature bandwidth it's going to have on like a 4G access point that it's flying around.
So really, this is just helping the machines take over.
Right.
Is what you're telling me.
Skynet, making Skynet a reality.
Yeah, great.
Flying data centers of the future.
In a small form factor.
Right.
I, for one, welcome our new robot overlords.
Yeah.
You just want to be the first one to say that, huh?
Hey, that's a quote I've seen tossed around many, many times on Twitter.
That's where we should have Tim Davis on this show, because he's just all in for all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But
he's been on the show like 2 or 3 times already.
We gotta block him for a little while. All right.
So one thing, this is not a technical topic, but there's several people on this call that are going to the VMUG Leader Summit. So let's talk about that a little bit. What are you guys excited about seeing and looking forward to out in Palo Alto in February? And Joe, this one's going to start out with you, and then we'll go to anybody else who wants to respond.
Okay, so this will be my return trip out there. I made it out for the Leader Summit in December last year, and
Nice.
This time I should actually be able to get out there with my co-leader as well, so that should be good. But honestly, we're trying to get insight from the very well versed, very experienced VMUG leaders that we have as to try to get our chapter off the ground again. Because unfortunately, Austin's just been really amazingly slow for a couple of years. Even as big as Austin is for tech site and everything, the VMUG presence has been really lacking for a few years now. So we unfortunately didn't make anywhere near as much headway as we thought we would getting it back up and running off the ground again. And yeah, seeing stuff like, Matt Heldstab doing his super VMUG where, all by himself, he draws in 120 plus people for a regular quarterly.
Yeah, he does good with that.
Yeah, we're hoping to get any ideas and any advantages we can out of everybody else.
Awesome. Al, you're going, right?
Yeah, I am. And for the same reasons that Joe just mentioned, the DC VMUG chapter has been struggling to get consistent attendees. Our most recent meeting had about 30 people. The room can seat up to 48. Unfortunately, we had some snow in the area that morning. We had some good speakers. We're presenting, one of which was Jad El-Zain.
Nice.
He went on for about 2 hours. It was fantastic. But our biggest challenge has been just getting people to come out consistently. Our location is fabulous. The folks at the a VMware office allow us to use their space. So that allows our sponsors to save some money on location. Essentially, it's my understanding all they have to pay up front for is the catering. But as Joe mentioned, my goal is when I'm out there, and this will be my first one attending, is to get some ideas from others, see what's working for them, and hopefully build upon it.
Yeah, and that's I'm going for Wisconsin, and this is one thing that I'm looking forward to is just having some dedicated time with other leaders and seeing what works, what doesn't. And Wisconsin VMUG's doing really good, but I want to keep it that way. So get some ideas of new things to try and help build our membership and keep it going strong. Tony, are you going?
Yes, I am going. It'll also be my first time. I've never been to the VMware campus. Funny thing is that I'm from Northern California, and I never even bothered to go to Palo Alto originally. So, and now I'll be going. But I actually want to go for the same reasons the Al and Joe said, because I just want to touch bases, kind of share ideas, brainstorm with other leaders, how to get, rich technical content, because that's what we want to do. I mean, I'm very passionate about that. We just wrapped up our last VMUG for the year on this past Wednesday, and we talked about the hybrid cloud. And it looks like this location we were in this past Wednesday might be our permanent Denver North area. So, but we try to do is like because the metro area is just so big here, we try to blanket each side, so north, middle, and then south. So just to touch bases, it'll be great to kind of hang out with you, with Joe and Al, and for those leaders that are going as well, and introduce myself to them.
Anybody else going?
I'm headed out.
Are you, Matt?
Yes.
Thought you might be. What are you looking forward to? Is this your first time?
This will be my first time. It'll also be my first time out to the campus. So really excited about that. One of the things I have, only because it's been a topic of our membership, is what's going to be done to improve the email situation. And that's the correspondence to members. Where right now it's a little bit over the top, to the point where we're getting for a normal meeting, because there's so much auxiliary communications, that members are unsubscribing, so they're not getting meeting notifications. So HQs have promised back to leadership, and I'm sure that you guys have seen this, that some things are in the works within Q1 of 19 to make some changes to that, and really looking forward to see what's going to be implemented and how that's going to all come about.
Yeah, kind of a funny story around that. Just like any other member, I've been getting too many emails myself, and I ended up unsubscribing. The way that the back-end systems are working, it can't be separated from the VMUG Leader Summit communication. So I unsubscribed from that because I was getting like 3, 4, 5 emails a day. I'm like, okay, this is enough. And then they're like, well, didn't you get your invite? And I'm like, no. We show you're unsubscribed in the system. I go, yeah, because you're sending me too many emails. Well, unfortunately, right now we can't separate that out. We're working on it. That must be part of the changes that you're talking about are coming maybe next year. But unsubscribing from that, unsubscribing from Leader Summit information as well, which is unfortunate.
There needs to be a balance. And I think everyone's aware of that at this point, and hopefully some changes are going to be made.
So it's 2018, almost 2019. We still don't know how to do email. Great.
Yep.
All right. So I think Nate, is it just pretty much just you and me not going?
Yeah, I might be out to Palo Alto, but it won't be. It will be something different around that time frame.
Because I'm just a lowly VMUG member, so I'm not even in leadership.
Well, that's okay, because now they're opening up new communities, so you too can be a part of this.
Ooh.
You can get volunteered for everything.
You guys have
voluntold.
Campus is nice.
Maybe.
Voluntold, you beat me to it.
Yeah. So there's a thing that happens out east called the Virtualization Technology User Group. And I'm angling to figure out a way that I can get to it, just because I'm curious to see how they run this thing. I've heard good feedback about it. I know guys like Chris Williams out east and Sean Thulin are involved with it. So I know they just scheduled their big meeting in January. They do it at the Patriots Stadium. So, Al, do you know anything about this?
No, I know it's very successful. They have a huge following. A ton of people show up. And I've heard nothing but wonderful things about it. I hope I'm not butchering his name. Clint Wyckoff.
Right.
I believe he works for AWS now, but
yeah, he used to be at Daystream.
Yeah, he recently went to the last one, and he and I chatted via DM, and he said nothing but great things. It was a wonderful experience, and he recommends everybody should attend it if possible.
Oh yeah,
yeah, I've heard a lot of good stuff about it.
I was going to try and go. Unfortunately, it's the same week as sales kickoff for us, so I was going to go hang out with Frapp and Luigi.
Yeah. After being in Boston in April, I'm jonesing to go back because it's such a nice place. But let's see.
Go back. You let me know. I've always wanted to go.
Yeah. Well, I think the event. I think it's like end of January, so it's like next week.
Yeah, it's January 24th.
Yeah. So we'll see, but it'll be a last minute thing if it happens for me. But and I would just be going just to check it out because I've been to a lot of user cons now. I've been to a few VM worlds, and I don't know. I mean, I understand that, you know, the name of the game for a lot of these things is to sell people stuff and to get your content in front of somebody so that somebody can actually buy it. And you know, the conversion rates on these kind of things is probably relatively higher. They wouldn't do them at all. So I don't know. The big complaint I've always heard from people about VMUGs or any kind of user group thing is it's too salesy. But you know, you can't have a free lunch without a sales pitch. So I don't know how you get away from that.
It's interesting that you say that because I don't get that feeling from our events.
Really?
Yeah, but we myself and my fellow leaders, we preach that message to the sponsors and the speakers. You know, there's a little bit of leeway. We'll give you a couple minutes, you know, as a sales pitch, but 99% of it has to be a technical deep dive. And they have an understanding. There's no issues with that.
Right, I agree. We try to basically say that ourselves too with our sponsors as well. You know, try to minimize the sales pitch and just talk about the content. How does your platform work? How does it bring value to us?
But that's the hard point to hit, though. It's hard to really provide value for themselves if they're not actively promoting and pitching their product, which, if they're doing it right, should also provide value to the viewer of, you know, this is a problem we can solve for you. So it's
some of it depends on the scale for the vendor, though, because there are quite a few vendors that have told me that for sponsoring events, you know, they're really expecting to get like one solid lead out of doing an event, and they're willing to drop a couple $1,000s to have that one deal potentially come through from it. So if they're thinking about it the right way, you know, they can present to everybody and they don't have to force the sales pitch down everybody's throat. You know, if they do some good technical content, if they've got good representation by their account guys or their SEs or whoever they sent on site, and they just, you know, start a good relationship with somebody, then they're probably going to get some good results out of that without having to do it as a sales pitch and turn everybody off from that.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what the cost of customer acquisition is for like a VMware or Veeam or something like that as it compares to the cost of sponsoring a VMUG event. You know, if a couple grand is really cheap for them to get, like you said, that one good lead, then, you know, it's a good business move for them to sponsor it, because they might potentially acquire a customer for much cheaper than they would otherwise have to spend to acquire one.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot better for them than cold calling around town or something like that, because they're getting people that are technical, that already know a little bit about the community and are going to have a broad base of other people to talk to about it that are either, you know, current customers, potential customers, even past customers, somebody that's moved off of a platform possibly, and they can get some good feedback. So, you know, they typically get a customer that's much more primed to hear about their platform than somebody that just, you know, got cold called.
Right. Yeah, definitely much hotter read.
Yeah.
How long? Go ahead, Tony. Sorry.
And that's the thing. It's got to be decent technical content. And I don't mind a little bit of sales in there as long as it's relevant. But the thing that really turns me off when I'm in one of those presentations is when they start knocking their competitors. It's like, we didn't come here to hear about your competitors and what you're doing better and what they're doing wrong. We're here to hear about your solution and provide good technical content, and then we'll be good.
Right.
Yeah, I can speak on behalf of DC VMUG. I actually have a Word document that kind of details what our expectations are of them. Mm-hmm. And they're welcome to ask us questions if they have any. But since I've been one of the leaders for a little bit over a year now, we've had 4 events since then. It's been relatively smooth. The content's been fine, and we haven't really had any issues in terms of sales pitch. And just going back to what I said earlier, our biggest asset is the ability to use the VMware Reston, the space at the VMware Reston office. It's consistent. I don't have to hunt for some location, track down the cost. It's been such a blessing. I can't emphasize it enough.
Nate, you talk at a lot of VMUG meetings, and you give a lot of presentations on topics. From a presenter point of view, what are you getting from feedback about talks that you give and when people are going to these things? Are they enjoying it? Are they saying it should be something else?
I think that's part of the challenge with the VMUG organization as a whole. And part of the challenge, I think, is that you have such a large variation of attendees. So you'll have some guys that work for like a very small commercial business. You know, I only have 4 vSphere hosts or something like that, versus you might have like a handful of guys in there that work for a Fortune 500 company. So, you know, trying to cater content that spans the different variations of users attending the user groups, I think, is the biggest challenge. Is the feedback that I've received in the past is great. Nate's coming in and he's talking about, you know, what VMware can do, and he's going to talk about this suite of product, this, that, or the other thing, but it doesn't apply to me because I'm just a small little shop and I only run vSphere. So I'm never going to put automation or orchestration in. I'll never put in an operations platform. I'm never going to go to the cloud. So a lot of the stuff that we talk about in the VMUGs, we really have to we have to figure out ways of being able to cater with topics that will interest all different audiences. I know in the past I've been asked to present at VMUGs and kind of bring content in that would make sense even more to some of the smaller commercial organizations, just to be able to give a little bit different variation of what most of the content that's spoken at VMUGs is catered towards more larger companies.
Yeah, it's really challenging. I mean, yeah, even the couple of VMUG talks that I've done, you know, I've because the majority of my customers are small businesses, and that's generally where I fit. You know, I try to kind of like approach my solutions from that angle, and you know, like, and it's tough. I mean, like, I built a whole presentation about how to build your own cloud data center and OVH and do it for a few $100 a month. And I mean, it took me 3 months just to figure out how to do that. And if I wasn't an independent consultant, I would never have had the time to do it. And it's one of these things of like, there's stuff that's coming in the horizon for small companies, and I keep waiting for VMware to open up their licensing just a tad to help them get there. Like, my biggest ask is, why isn't there an NSX Essentials that gives you kind of a CPU capped full version of what NSX Enterprise does, or something to that effect? Because I can see customers doing it, but you know, when they have to spend $80,000 or pay somebody's salary, a lot of times they're going to buy the body, not the software. So
yeah.
So I just killed the mood, so I'm sorry.
You're just keeping it real, that's all.
You know, that's what I try to do. I get on my soapboxes, I complain, and everybody seems to agree with me. So.
But Nate brought up a good point. The issues that he described, or accommodating, you know, the needs of that group or that locality, it's not something that me personally, or I don't think any of my fellow leaders feel is something that we're challenged with because of the proximity to the federal government.
So what are you saying, Al? So from like a federal government perspective, whatever they want, they just buy? Or
I wouldn't say they buy, but I don't think there's a...
They just get it.
They get it, and I don't think we have to, focus on what we think they may be interested in because there's such a wide gamut.
Interesting. So a lot of this, I think, jumping back into a different suggested topic that's kind of piling on top of some of this new stuff. So there's been a lot of banter lately about VDI, and is 2019 the year of the VDI? My experience with VDI varies a little bit. I did the Citrix version of it at one place that I was an employee, and that was okay. And then I did a pilot for VMware Horizon for a customer last year. And it's just kind of been like onesie twosie small stuff. And, I myself have not seen a very compelling, great use case for VDI. So Matt, I think you brought this up. So where do you see this going?
Well, I think it's best to start with, we need to expand the definition of VDI. I mean, is it VDI as we're looking at traditional desktops, or are we looking at more now of the whole entire MDM EUC space and what that means and what it means for edge compute and edge access?
See, that's another thing. VMware, I think, is confusing the waters a little bit because now everything is Workspace ONE in terms of like AirWatch and all this other stuff. AirWatch Horizon, Workspace ONE, which was a software layover thing. Now it's all just sort of this one weird conglomerate. Correct me if I'm wrong, Nate. But, that to me is like another kind of area where like it just gets confusing because from a customer perspective, if I went in and tried to sell somebody Workspace ONE and then I start talking about VDI, I don't know. How do you nail that down?
It's building the use case. It's figuring out what makes, what's the drive to look at. Are you looking at just strictly MDM solutions, or are you looking to build out a whole entire path to the app? Is the app be able to be replatformed is it legacy? Is it brand new? Do you need to sandbox it? It's looking at more of what's the best way to deliver the app now, rather than just saying, okay, we're going to put an app on a desktop. And I think that's where the power of the whole entire suite of solutions within VMware's EUC space starts to come to play.
Yeah, I would agree with, I would echo that. I think part of the challenge I have, and some of the larger customers that I work with have gone down this path of, well, we're just going to provide VDI for everyone. And when they actually take the time and they do an evaluation of their end user base or their associate base, the reality of it is probably, 70% of the people don't need an actual virtual desktop. What they need is an application that they can run, on a phone, on a tablet, on a computer or whatever to be able to do their day-to-day job. So I think, kind of redefining what does that mean? What is VDI dead, and being able to determine, what does VDI actually entail? Because if we're talking, similarities around, like if we're just talking published applications and being able to provide that in a common framework across any type of a device, to me, I think there's a big draw for that. But there are still use cases. Examples would be, there's a large motorcycle company that's a customer of mine in the Milwaukee area, hint. And, one of the challenges they have is they've got a bunch of folks that are over in India do application development. They do AutoCAD related work, but they can't, ship them a big high-end power machine to do AutoCAD, but, they can provide them a 3D enabled desktop in the data center, allow them to build all these AutoCAD files and not have to try to transfer these, gigabyte size files across the ocean to be able to get them back into a data center. So, I mean, there are there are use cases for it. I just don't. I would say if we're talking full blown virtual desktop, I think we're seeing less and less of that, and we're seeing more of a demand for. I just need an app that I can be able to get to be able to do my job with the appropriate security controls and access, on any kind of a device that I'm using.
Right. And like the pilot that I did for a customer was I guess I would call them a mid-sized insurance company. And where it kind of died because they wanted to do this for their customer service people to build them some VDIs and let that be their desktop replacements. Where this sort of died in terms of the project is all of a sudden they discovered that there's one, quote unquote, legacy application that these customer service agents have to use, and they use it for entering every single incoming claim that comes from a customer. And this legacy application was built and running on a Windows 2000 VM. And because it's this legacy application, they access it via good old-fashioned Windows 2000 terminal services still.
Yeah.
It doesn't fit inside a modern-day VDI environment. Can't use it. And so in them being able to, they bought the software back in like 1995 from some company in Canada, and who knows if they are even still in existence. And so for them to basically rebuild their entire customer service entry system in a new product would have cost them who knows how many hundreds of thousands of dollars to develop that software. And so all of a sudden, boop, VDI disappeared. And so it's like, and I think that might be one of the biggest barrier to entries for large scale VDI or even small scale VDI, because you have these applications out there that, they need just one application. That's really all these people needed. But in that kind of a sense, all these people really need is a Windows terminal server. And so that was my end. That's kind of where I ended the conversation with the customers. I'm like, listen, all you really need to do here is spin up a couple of Windows 2016, remote desktop session hosts, put the application, migrate it to that, kill your Windows 2000 VMs, and you're done. And that basically ended my project with them, because I'm like, there's nothing else I can do for you, because you're not going to rewrite this application. And I can see that in mass happening everywhere, where there's just apps that just don't work.
Well, so let's look at that as an example. So it's now more about how are you going to deliver that RDSH session? How is that going to be deployed? How is that going to scale out? You want to be able to remotely push that out as far as when you're doing initial deployments for new PCs where you're not doing imaging, or you're doing something like auto deploy or whatnot. How does that move down the workspace one stack? Looking at what you have existing and what the limitations are, but then still deploying that out in a secure environment using, Gen 2 deployment tools.
Right. And that's just, where I exit the conversation, because it's, I'm not an endpoint guy. So, but I understand what you're saying. I mean, you still have to get to the app somehow. And through most of this kind of Windows stuff, I mean, you can do, good old fashioned thin clients, but it gets you a desktop. But what does it really even mean for it to be the year of the VDI? Does it mean that all of a sudden it's going to be mainstream? Is that what they're actually talking about? Anybody feel strongly about this?
I think part of it is just a joke and a catchphrase. I don't know. That's the way I took it. I mean, I met Johan at VMworld this year, and he's got T-shirts made up for it, and he just came out with a book. I think part of that particular saying is just kind of a catchphrase.
Perhaps maybe more people, more enterprises will adopt it. I know we use it for our call centers, for our what do you call it, remote workforce. We have agents that work from home, and we present them this virtual desktop inside of a Windows to go stick. So I get your point, Britton, when you're saying that there's certain applications that don't work. We can't put our Avaya 1X soft phone inside VDI because we'll just get a lot of choppiness. We were getting issues. So we have to render that within that the to go stick, the Windows to go stick. So I feel you. Hopefully, what I think that means the year of the VDI is maybe more people adapted, or maybe VMware comes out with more functionality. I mean, who knows? But to me, yeah, it's a catchphrase.
I mean, there was some good. If you go back and listen to the last Virtually Speaking podcast, Brian Madden and Johan were on there together, kind of like debating each other live, which was a really interesting conversation. So, if this is intriguing to you, go back and listen to the number one virtualization podcast. We're number two, but
we are.
I'm claiming the number two spot. I'll give them the number one spot.
Nice. Well, they are fans.
Right. Hey, Pete.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move out of this. So back to the airing of grievances. So in terms of the show in general, is like if you guys are hearing us talk to somebody, has there ever been a question that pops into your head like, oh, they should ask this, or even if it's something we should ask every guest, do you guys have stuff like if you're in an interview and somebody's asked you this, or you've heard somebody else ask it, and is there kind of a go-to question that you are always looking for an answer to? So I'm going to go to all of you on this. So Donnie, I'm going to pick you first because you're the top of the list.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I could take a page from the Geek Whisperers podcast, one thing that I always liked that they asked, they would always ask what not to do when they were talking about a specific topic. So many people talk about best practices and, how a platform works and what you should do with it. Or, if it's on the soft skills side, like, the do's rather than focusing on the negatives. So I guess I can leave you with that,
I'll take it. Gonzo?
I would say, like, if any were like if migration projects, if anybody's migrating to a point from data center A to data center B, how do you do it with documentation? How do you document all that? What are your tips and tricks you can kind of give us to document that? Do you use Visio? Is there a lot of spreadsheets? Because I'm a visual guy, and most people tend to be visual learners. It's great when you speak about it, but if you have a high level depiction of what's going on, it speaks wonders.
So do you not enjoy doing documentation?
I do not enjoy it, and that's what I do.
I hate writing documentation so much. And yeah,
I'm sorry. It's a necessary evil. I get it. I do it for a living. And I don't like it.
I see it as not even necessary. And quite frankly, I mean, if I'm starting a project for somebody and they have something halfway built already, I'm not going to ask for a document that somebody might have written that might be halfway accurate. I'm going to go look in the environment and actually see how it's set up.
Well, there you go.
That's the documentation to me.
That's right. You take your screenshots. Like, this is what I see, and then document from where you take over.
I'm not going to enter somebody's environment and then have them give me a Go book, and I'm going to sit down and page through this thing in a PDF or whatever. That to me is just a waste of time. I will look at it live and see what it looks like. That's my documentation rant. I
think most people would agree with you.
I hate doing documentation, but like you said, necessary evil. I mean, I think it also, you have to consider the audience that is going to be looking at your documentation as well. I mean, a VP is probably not going to look at, a very deep technical, layer 2, layer 3, networking graph. They want to see traffic flow. What does it look like when traffic egresses the site? Something, simple, 10,000 foot, or process documentation where, if you are the SME for a technology, the ins and outs of how something works. Maybe everyone on your team doesn't know that. So you document a process of, how to spin up a new NFS volume, or, how to deploy a VM that is, confines to your deployment procedures, that sort of thing.
Right. And I would say when you're doing that documentation, if you just document that one task, don't piggyback on top of it. Yes, there is prerequisites to it. Just name those out, bullet points. It's fine. Because I know when I've read documentation, and sometimes it's just too much. Like, what are you trying to say? You lose me. In addition to that, also is when they don't define their acronyms. They just throw these acronyms and the end reader knows them, and they don't. I mean, just do an acronym list really quick, define it, and then we're good. That's my rant on.
All right. Thank you. Nate, what question should we ask?
Well, I hate to say it, but I'm a little bit of a standards guy. So I've been on my own internal tirade since I've been at VMware, because when I first came there, I was like, well, what am I supposed to be doing? We've got the Google App Suite, we've got Office 365, we've got people saving files in Horizon files, we've got people saving files in, Dropbox and Box.net and OneDrive and Google Drive. So there was never really any standards when I came there. And it was hard because before coming to VMware, I worked at Kohl's. I think some of you know, but that's where I came from before coming to VMware. And Kohl's was a very standards-driven kind of lean organization. And they had to be, because they moved 100 miles an hour all the time. Very big ITSM shop. So everything had to be documented with defined standards based off of kind of lean methodologies. And the reason being is, if they decided to come back in someday and say, hey, we're going to switch our level 1, level 2 support teams to be a different managed solutions provider, and they didn't have all their ducks in a row from a documentation and standards point of view, it was a disaster. I'll put it that way. So coming to VMware and not having standards was a big shift, honestly, for me. And I was surprised that we didn't have more of a standardized approach. So my ask to you would be, any one of your guests that comes on, I would ask them what they do from a standards point of view to be able to provide standardized methodologies, processes, procedures for anything that they're doing. Because I think if you've got 10 different people doing things 10 different ways, who's right? So I'm going to leave it at that.
All right. And the Tonys are multiplying, so if you're watching the video later, you're not seeing double.
Yeah, we now have a clone.
Oops.
Is that your mini-me?
I think we need Reeves to sing the Brady Bunch theme song again.
Nice.
Yeah.
How do you standardize processes or information, or how would you rephrase that into a single question, Nate?
How do you define standard processes and methodologies that allow, you as a technologist or you as a speaker to be more efficient or effective? Put it something like that.
All right. I'm going to go back and look at that later.
But if I can add to it, and I agree with the points that everyone made, how do you enforce it to streamline the process? Because I don't want to get into the, whatever you want to call it. That's been a challenge where I am, is sure, you can document it from now until the end of time, but are you going to follow those processes? Are you going to be held accountable for those processes? And if there are changes made, are you going to share those changes with everybody?
Yeah.
Cool. Matt, what should we be asking people?
It's more of a soft question. If the time would allow, to the presenter, how did you get where you're at, and what would you change?
And I feel like we do try to get her in a way to get there with some people, but that is good. Because that's
try to get background and how they came.
But at the same time, I think what you're going at, Matt, is a little bit more nuanced, where it's sort of like, what do you see as the steps of, like for Nate, he went from Kohl's to VMware, but I'm sure it wasn't that easy. So, at the end of the day, it's a career and it takes a lifetime. But
as a listener, it's always interesting to hear other people's stories. It's interesting to hear other person's career developments and the choices that they've made things that they may reflect back on and may have made differently.
Right. I like it. Al, what should we be asking people?
I like Matt's point. If you had something that you could change looking back, what would it be? How would you improve it? And what methods or resources did you use to get you to the point where you are now? But speaking on behalf of, I guess, the community or being a part of the community, for me personally, I'm sure others feel the same way. It's definitely been a life changer for me. It's been very positive. It's nice to have people that you can be upfront with and ask them open-ended questions and not feel like it's going to, for lack of a better way of putting it, bite you in the ass down the road.
Okay. Joe, I got lost there for a second. What should we be asking people?
So I like the path that Matt and Al are going down. I definitely like the, trying to help others kind of shortcut a little bit in their career. Like what are the getting started resources that are, what people followed, and if somebody's trying to catch up on a technology that they're not currently ingrained in, what's even the next step? Like what is the thing that's coming down the pipeline that they should really start learning now? Because even if you were to tell somebody, hey, go look at NSX, if somebody deep dives into NSXV without even having the suspicion that NSXT is what's going to be the platform going forward, that might be something that doesn't necessarily help them, whereas if they were studying both at the same time, they would kind of be prepared for that switch when it comes. And then I'm
not convinced of that, by the way.
Yeah, we keep hearing it. I've heard quite a few people that have told us that as soon as feature parity there is, it's going to be T all the way.
Yeah, we'll see about that.
Yeah. So, anyways,
inside baseball. Sorry.
Yeah. And then the other thing, just because, kind of to put people on the spot, I always like asking the question similar to what Amy Lewis asks whenever she does her confessions. It's what's the biggest thing you've screwed up in your career that you got away with?
Oh, that's a good one.
Nice.
I thought you were going to ask what was your software defined moment.
Oh, no. No, I flat out put you on the spot. I'll say, what was your biggest screw up that you got away with?
Hopefully they're not working there anymore.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. You guys probably saw this coming, but Joe, what was the biggest screw up that you got away with?
Honestly, mine was a fun one. It was actually when I was working at the hospital here locally. I'd been on staff for maybe about a week, maybe 2 weeks, and we did an upgrade over the lunch period where we were swapping out a bunch of network gear, and the hospital was getting acquired into HCA, so we had massive upgrades to go from this small, physician-owned practice to being part of this massive conglomerate, and we were swapping out network gear during lunch, and network guy told me, okay, we're good to go. Start moving all the cables. We started taking everything down. Next thing you know, like somebody's beating on the door in the hallway to the data center. And I walked over to the door, and it was the lead cardiologist of the practice. And he was just sitting there telling me like, hey, everything just went down. I'm like, what are you talking about? So yeah, I was in my office, and I was just watching the scores on ESPN. I know I shouldn't have been doing it. You guys told me not to. And suddenly my computer just went dead. And I had no access to anything. So I just kind of told the guy, I was like, look, all right, man, here's your one-time free pass. Cause I'm the new guy. I don't know if you've been a problem in the past or not, but just know we're always watching. And I went back into had like a dozen messages from the network guy where he told me we were totally working on the wrong stack and he'd give me the wrong information. So yeah, we took down the entire office and all the thin clients during lunch, but yeah, just, decided to try and own it and tell the guy like, well, hey, you admitted that you were doing something you weren't supposed to. So yeah, we're always watching you. So just be aware next time.
That's classic.
That was fun.
Like how you shifted that blame. ESPN took you down.
Exactly. Yeah.
Way to think on your toes, though.
No kidding.
That's good. Donnie, what shouldn't we do?
That's a great question, actually. I'd say, if anything, it's a really minor point for me, but it seems like occasionally the the topics start to drift a little bit, and once you rein them back in, it's good. But some of them, I think, maybe rein them back in a little quicker.
Some people like to talk, and it's difficult to rein them back in.
We have discovered
someone that is not a podcast host, so I definitely don't know the struggles that you guys go through when it comes to
try not to be rude about it, but
it's hard.
It's hard, yeah.
So I actually, because of some work I did for a nonprofit years and years ago, I'm connected to one of the local news anchors at Channel 15 in Madison. This guy named John, super great guy. He's interviewed presidents, he's interviewed everybody. And so after Tony and I did an episode with a VMware employee who shall not be named, who has the gift of gab, we ran into this where we just couldn't get him to stop in the episode. And I sent this news anchor guy and a question on Facebook. I'm like, John, you got to help me. How do you cut off somebody when they're being long-winded? And he actually wrote me back this like really long, thoughtful response. And I might have to share it in the notes of this episode. But basically, he's just like, you just got to kind of, try to be nice about it, but at the same time, you're as the interviewer, you're in control, or trying to be, and you have to kind of know when they're getting off into the weeds and try to guide them back in. And it's an art form. And I doing this now for over a year, my hat's off to anybody who interviews people for a profession, because dang, it's hard, because people like to talk.
Well, and it's tough too, I think, when, you don't want to stifle the passion that someone has for a given topic. So if you can tell that someone is very invested, personally or professionally in whatever they're talking about, it's hard to want to just be like, all right, cool, let's move on to something else when they're clearly, thinking passionately about it.
And it's difficult doing it over this medium too, because it's the internet. And so I've got to jump in on top of you, but just to get you to stop. I can't put my hand on your shoulder and say, hey, I need to say something.
Just mute them.
Yeah, you do have to mute button.
You're going to have to use visual objects, right? So you're going to have like a yield and a stop sign and a go sign, right? So yeah. So if you have somebody that's going at least through the video chat here, right? You can at least put up the stop sign or put up a timer.
Right. Well.
Whatever.
Yeah. We're learning. That's the biggest thing Tony and I have gained out of all of this, is how to actually talk to people and get meaningful information out of them, especially when we're dealing with vendors who are trying to pitch stuff. It's so easy for them to just slip into their pitch. And that I feel like I'm getting better at bumping people out of their marketing speak. But, it just takes time.
And that's the flip side of it for me, is that the reason that I keep coming back to the podcast and I keep listening to it on my commute and I keep listening to it at work is because it's not scripted. It's not, it is not 100% a sales pitch. It's unscripted. It's real people having real real conversations, and so that I think is kind of the other side of the same coin when it comes to letting people speak passionately for longer periods of time, is that, it's tough to have one without the other.
And sometimes you get really good nuggets in there that you don't want to interrupt.
Right.
Sometimes some of that stuff just kind of happens organically, and we let them have a little bit of liberty. But and some people get long-winded. We have to rein them back in.
But being honest should be respected. I think most of us would agree with that. So, when Brendan kind of stood up and said, I don't know about NSX, T, that's fine. I didn't take it one way or the other. I don't think Joe did either. It's just being honest, telling how he feels, and we're open to a conversation about it.
Oh, I'm sure Joe took offense immediately.
Always. Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. So, I think it helps that Tony and I have an almost 25-year history with each other. Is that how long it's been? I don't even remember anymore.
Is Tony that old?
Yeah, it was like 8th grade.
It's Tony that old.
It's Tony's a baby face. Yeah.
Hey, I got
kissing up to the host.
So that helps. But Tony, is there anything I could do better besides shutting up once in a while?
I I think honestly, you and I could do a better job of some pre-show prep. I know, we're both busy. We both have a couple of kids, but if we could spend just a little bit more time going over some of the things that we're going to do, and as far as like an outline, I think that would help.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's been a couple episodes where you've randomly, Tony, do this, and I'm like, what? What am I doing here?
Dance, Tony, dance.
Pretty much.
Well, it's worked out so far.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
No, I agree with that.
That piggybacks on what Donnie said. That's the appeal to this podcast. It works well.
Yeah. Well, I think like Britton said, long history of Britton being one of my best friends. I mean, we've hung out for years in person. We live a couple hours apart now, but I think that shows through in the podcast. We have got a really good rapport with each other and know each other well. So.
Yeah, like I knew you when you had and were really excited about a Geo Metro with an 8-ball on the shifter.
That thing was awesome, dude. It got good gas mileage, but yet it was still fast because it was so light.
The 3-cylinder Geo Metro.
And my dad always used to joke that I had like big stereo aspirations in there, so I had like this massive subwoofer.
Oh yeah, you did.
He always used to joke that thing pushed me down the road, not the 3-cylinder gerbil engine that I had.
There was the sub in the back.
Yeah. The sub was heavier than your car.
Yeah.
I drove a 1986 sky blue Dodge Omni for a while, so I know where you're coming from.
Nice. Yeah, and there was a couple times where my Geo was picked up and turned around in between two cars, so I couldn't leave at high school.
Oh yeah.
But the joke was on them. The joke was on them because one of the cars left and I was able to just back out. That's a good time. All right, what else we got for him, Britton?
I don't know, man. I mean, we're kind of running close to time here, so I mean, that's sort of the one thing that just I've never really like picked a time randomly to say this is how long an episode should be. I generally just go until we run the well dry, and so I mean, if people think it's too long or we're not long enough, I'm not. I really, the honest answer to that is I just go as long as I feel is within reason for the given conversation. So. I try not to go over an hour and a half, but
I think our shortest one was like an hour, but it was a good hour.
Right. As long as there's some value in there, I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any direct questions for Tony or I? Raise your hand if you're sure.
I'm sure.
You've probably answered this before, but why did you decide to start the podcast?
Okay, so I was
we touched on it a little bit.
Yeah, I've talked about it at least once, but I was working at a customer's office at like 10 to 11:30 or some one late crazy night, and I've been trying to expand the business and trying to gain clients and trying to gain marketability and exposure, and there's just not a lot of great ways to do that when you're a solo entrepreneur. So I've been, for years I've been taking in business content and how to run a business and doing marketing and doing all this kind of stuff. And I stumbled across this insane guy from New Jersey called Gary Vaynerchuk. And he is famous for taking his parents' wine store in New Jersey and doing Google AdWords and blowing it up from like a couple $100,000 a year to a $30 million a year business. And he now runs this huge online social media ad agency with like 700 employees. And the guy's just, his aspiration is to someday buy the New York Jets. And I'm pretty sure he will do it. And he's just a crazy guy. And his basic thesis is, if you are anybody today, not even necessarily wanting to start a business, you need to have a presence online somehow. If you can write, you should have a blog or Twitter. If you can talk, do a podcast. If you're good looking, he's really big on this. If you're good looking, you should have an Instagram account and do video on YouTube. Because if you're an attractive person, it just wins in video. so he's
cool,
all.
I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. And so So his kind of basic thesis is like, just just start doing something, get it out there. One of his sort of catchphrases is document, don't create things. So, because he's just like, how cool would it be if Jeff Bezos, back in the day of starting Amazon.com, had somebody following around with a camera and you could see his day-to-day activities as he's founding Amazon.com? That would be amazing to go back and watch now. So that's sort of his thing, is like, if you have any sort of aspiration of being anybody, just do it. Just start creating stuff. Put it out there. Just do it. Like, he started doing videos on YouTube when it first launched, and it was just him sitting in his office with a camcorder on the other side, and the audio was horrible and it was nasty. And I listened to this podcast episode that he did talking about this, and I pulled out my phone and I texted Tony. I'm like, and I'd been thinking about it for a while, but I heard this kind of prompting, and I'm just like, Tony, I want to start a podcast. Will you do it with me? And Tony's general answer was, I think it was like, I don't know if I can do that.
I thought I told you yes right away.
I don't know. I'd have to dig back in my iMessage history to see if it's still there, but it might be.
I think a lot of it, when you approached me about it, was I was already getting more involved in the community. I was already a V-expert at the time. I was already traveling to do VMUG talks out of state, and I was just like, why not? It's one more way to get exposure. I was certainly nervous about it, and I'm like, what are we going to do in terms of value add? But
yeah, because we're, like I said at the beginning, we're just two schmucks from Wisconsin. Who's going to want to listen to us? Right. So that's sort of the general genesis of it. And I just, like, I've slowly watched this thing grow over the last year. We've been doing it for just over a year. And I think, based on the rough, poor analytics that I have, because this thing's all run off of a WordPress engine, we have about between 90 and 100 subscribers on the audio feed. And so, because every time I publish an episode, there's this huge spike of downloads, and that's about where the first week is, and then it starts to trail down. And I mean, what's amazing to me, and one reason why we're having him back, our most popular episode is the one we did with Chris Williams, where he went off on AWS. That one is by far the most popular one, probably because he's hilarious
on that one. Yeah, he's a super funny guy, and the knowledge bombs he was dropping, crazy.
So
you need to get him another proxy for the whiteboard, though, man, because gosh, that handwriting. Ooh.
Sorry, Chris.
I love you, buddy. I'd give you a high five, but I can't reach. So
he's too tall. Yeah. So, all right. Any other questions? I will give 2 more questions, and then we'll finish. To anybody.
I've got one if nobody else wants to go. So
go ahead.
Sure.
So Britton, why don't you talk more in person, man? Because I met you at VMworld this year, and I think you said maybe like 4 words over the span of about 3 days.
Because I hate people, Joe.
I've been trying to pry him out of his shell for the last 10 years.
No,
he's doing much.
As I have said, I just generally, I'm a very to myself kind of guy. Like right here, this quote unquote podcast studio that I'm sitting in my basement is like my work at home office. It's in the basement. If I was down here, 3 days out of 5 per week and never actually interacted with another human being in person, I'd be just fine. I am not a people person, and it's just not in my nature. And try as much as Tony and Ariel Sanchez will, they will not change that about me. So
how did you handle the NSX roving reporter duty? Because you did that well.
I have no idea, Al.
Right, now, I'll disagree with that. I think you're really good at it.
Yes.
I think that there's a part of you that enjoys the social interaction because you're so good at it.
No,
you have a natural passion for it.
Well, it's probably genetic because my father's an evangelical pastor, so there's probably that. But so it's one of these things of I can do it, but oh man, does it exhaust me. it's really hard. It's hard. It's super hard work for me to like be engaging with people and actually pretend to be interested in what they're talking to me about. And you know, I apologize. I'm just being honest, but I mean, you know, a lot of people want to talk to you about stuff like, and this past VMworld was weird because like I'm walking down the halls and all of a sudden people are like, "Oh, hey, it's you," and I'm just like, "That's never happened before." Whose phone is ringing?
Hudson.
That's me. I can't mute me.
You have a real phone? Holy cow!
You have a home phone?
I do.
Wow.
Yes. Don't even go there.
So in a nutshell, Joe, that's the answer. Is I like doing this because it's once a month, and you know, and I don't have to like, you know, go see people to do it. You know,
but I think you're in your comfort zone, as you mentioned. You're surrounded.
Yeah, and it's like I can, when I'm done, I can publish this thing, go upstairs, and tuck my kids in. You know, it's just life, and I appreciate that you guys think I do a good job at this. The VMworld NSX Roman Reporter thing that just kind of came out of nowhere. You know, Amy Lewis and Katie Holmes from the NSX marketing team, God bless them, they asked me to do it and just hoped that I could. And I just kind of pulled a rabbit out of a hat with that one. So, I don't know, fingers crossed they'll ask me back next year, but we'll see.
I think we're going to have to print up new stickers for this year to just hand out to everybody of like, if you see this guy in the hallway, just stop him and talk to him.
Yes.
I'm going to put on a Joe Hughes mask. All right, one more question for the peanut gallery, and then we will wrap it up.
I have one, unless anyone else wants to go.
Go for it.
What have you guys committed to mastering in 2019?
Oh, that's too broad.
Brain, I know yours. Public communication.
Does winning the lottery, does winning the Powerball count?
That would be nice. Tony, go ahead.
That was actually one of the topics. I wouldn't say my goal is to master this, but my goal is to learn a lot more about it and become at least proficient in. That would be, you know, Docker and containers. It's been something that actually Donnie and I have been working on over the past, I don't know, few weeks. We worked for a few weeks towards the beginning of my leave, getting some containers up. It's always kind of been a mystery to me. I'm so used to VMs and that architecture, and just I've enjoyed learning more about it, and I'd like to do more and spin some more stuff up. And I'd like to go a little bit more in depth too. I'd like to learn about orchestration with Kubernetes and some of the other more in depth things once I understand some more of the basics. So I think that's probably my biggest thing. I also would like to have some time to delve into the AWS certificate program that I started a year and a half ago. But yeah, life is busy. We all know that, especially if you have kids. So
no doubt about that.
Yeah. If I had to pick any one thing that I want to try to focus on in 2019, I mean, for me, unfortunately, I say unfortunately, but unfortunately, it has to be NSXT. I mean, I spent the better part of a year and a half getting all my V stuff done, and then VMware throws me under the bus with this T thing. So I don't know. I'm gonna do more with it. One of our upcoming guests. This is actually a good segue. I found them after VMworld, but there's a company, a small startup out there called Rest NSX. These guys are doing amazing things. Holy cow! And part of it is they have migration APIs built for moving stuff from V to T, and it's just really, really cool. I wanted to start building stuff out in T in the lab, but then my lab partially died, so I had to rebuild everything from scratch, and I didn't have a backup. You know,
RAID 5.
Yeah, but oh well.
Shame on you.
Yeah, I at least had my domain controller replicated to my cloud host, so I didn't lose everything. But
comment Joe use?
What's that?
I said comment, Joe Hughes.
It's fine. I'll give him grief later.
I'm a Veeam partner too.
Nice.
Sounds like that's a shout out for a nice data protection solution there.
Yeah. It's just a matter of, but no, that's where I say it's a lab. It's meant to break. So,
but I believe you had some production data in there too, didn't you?
Oh, probably. I think I lost about 30 virtual machines that I'm not getting back. So,
ouch.
Yeah. But, part of that was my Horizon build for my lab, and there's a whole bunch of junk that, it's not coming back. But, oh well. Okay, guys. Thank you so much. First of all, for listening. I mean, when Tony and I did this, we thought, maybe some of our family members might listen and go to sleep to this. Unfortunately, Tony and I have both lost our mothers to cancer, so we can't count on our moms to listen to this. So you guys are filling in for our moms. So thanks.
We appreciate it.
And yeah, it's just, this has been a really fun journey, and I'm sure I would like to probably bring a lot of you guys back individually so we can go more in depth with you guys on stuff that you're interested in. But that's probably going to be 2020, to be honest with you. So,
cool.
Tony, anything else you want to add?
No, I just echo the thoughts that Brent just expressed. We appreciate you guys listening. We didn't think when we started this we would have any listeners. We were just doing it just to get something out there, and really appreciate all of the new friends that we made. And it's been nice meeting a lot of you guys out at VMworld and other events. So we just really appreciate it and hope you're getting something out of it. And feel free to shoot us a direct message on Twitter or something in the future if you have questions or suggestions for the show. We're always open to feedback, and we're trying to make the show better. So we appreciate that.
Yeah. So thanks, guys. I'm going to play us out, and we will close up the recording.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Have a good night, all.
Thanks, guys.
Again, this has been GigaCast episode 24 for December 9th, 2018. Thank you again to Donnie, Nate, Matt, Al, Joe, Tony G in Denver, and my illustrious co-host, Mr. Tony Reeves. Thank you, sir. Again, promo for our next episode is we're going to be talking VMware Cloud Foundation with the Cloud Foundation crew, either my brother and Mr. Kevin T-Beer, or just my brother. We'll see if Kevin wants to join or not. And then after that, we'll see what happens in February, but it's going to be an exciting year. We've got a lot of stuff coming. I think I'm really excited about it. It's going to be cool. And I think after this kind of, important listener session, feedback session, I think it's just going to get better. So thanks for listening, everybody. We will talk to you later.